Well, hey everybody, and welcome to episode 28 of the Pixar Post Podcast. As usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And in this episode, we've got a lot to cover again. We're going to talk about Radiator Springs 500 and a half. We're going to talk about the big news of the day, Michael Giacchino scoring Inside Out. We're going to talk about the continuation of the Pixar Pipeline Project, and we're going to interview someone from Pixar's editorial team. We're going to talk some more Pixar Post Book Club and Toy Story of Terror news. Holy cowza.
Oh my gosh, that was a mouthful.
All right, well, let's get right into it. So the big news of the day today, May 27th, is that actually a few days ago, it never popped up, but on May 24th, so last Sunday, during a pre-concert question and answer session, Michael Giacchino announced that he will be scoring Inside Out.
Yes, he confirmed it. We've kind of had rumblings and kind of had a feeling a few weeks ago that he was going to be scoring an upcoming Pixar film. So this is really exciting because he has quite the history with Pixar.
It's actually really astounding. When I listed them out in our post, and of course with any post, just go to our show notes, episode 28 that we talk about through this episode, pixarpost.com, click on the podcast, episode 28, all the links will be there. But in the post that we were writing up earlier today, the list is really long. I mean, there's some of them that you forget about, like the web short, George and AJ. Mm-hmm. You forget about Doug's Special Mission, right? You forget about all those Jack Attack, all those little ones that are in there.
But you also don't really remember, like, Lifted. Like, oh, who scored that?
Right. For some reason, that one...
One-man band. I mean, that's just about music. That's one of my favorites.
Right.
But my goodness, it's like he has quite, the resume there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And it's...
well, of course, The Incredibles and Ratatouille and Up.
Cars 2.
Cars 2, yes.
All right, you want to list them all?
No,
Jeez.
you don't need to.
I think we pretty much did there, almost.
La Luna.
All right, yeah, there's a couple there. But the concert was in Lucerne, Switzerland. And it's a thing that they do every year. I think it's like what they do is they actually play the movie on the screen behind, and then he conducts the orchestra to play the music that would be playing in the movie live. It's really cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
I know, I'd love to see that, because obviously they have that Pixar in Concert series,
right,
where they show the individual clips from the movies, but it'd be really cool to just literally watch like a larger chunk of the movie. I don't know if it's the whole thing, though. I should have looked into that. You didn't see anything?
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But if it was, that would have been amazing to actually have like a full-on orchestra there play it.
Right. Yeah, it was really cool showing them.
Especially with a composer like him.
Exactly. Yeah, and then the Q&A session in regards to that, let's listen to the clip where he says, here's what he's working on coming up, and he talks about a few more of his projects in there as well.
Well, I'm still trying to finish Jupiter Ascending and Planet of the Apes. Those come out in July, but surprisingly, we aren't finished yet. And when I'm not here talking to you, I'm back at the hotel on the phone going, wait, they did what? They changed what scene? They took what out? Now it's not going to work. What are we going to do? So, there's all of this at the end of a project where everyone's scrambling to finish and get it done. So when I go home, I think we might have a day of scoring on each film, just to fix all the things now that got broken, put them back together again. But after that, then I go into a film called Tomorrowland, which is directed by Brad Bird and has George Clooney in it. And then after that, I go on to a film called Inside Out, which is directed by Pete Docter, who did the movie Up for Pixar. And then after that, I go right on to Jurassic World. So I'm basically working from now till next May straight. So it's going to be crazy. Yes,
that's going to be fantastic for us.
Look, I can't complain. I get to work on things that I love with people I love, and that's it's great.
So obviously in that clip we heard that there's a little bit of echo. That was because that's actually from a gentleman that was actually just an attendee at the show, and he filmed a lot, like in a lot of sections. He did a little earlier talk, he did the Q&A, he did a lot of the session from it. It was actually really neat. So if you're interested, definitely check it out.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that was discussed that I thought was an interesting question that was asked, obviously if you're a fan of scoring music or Giacchino's work, I recommend listening to this in general, the Q&A session. But one of the questions was, is there a difference between live animation scoring for live action versus animation? And he said, no, not really. He said that it's all made up. even if it's people, they're actors, they're acting a role. He's looking up at the screen at Carl and
That's
Ellie.
true. I guess I never thought about it like that. I mean, it's still something like a person doing something.
Right.
Like doing an action. So whether it is a human, like a real live person, or an animated character, they're still doing something that he has to score and create that emotion to.
Right. It's all up on the screen.
Yeah.
That's what he says. And he says there's no difference between Superman and a rat that wants to cook. And it's true.
That's true.
It's interesting if you think about it that way, because we just associate people differently.
Because
we are people.
Right. So you kind of think that, there's got to be something different. But I guess when you think about it, when he says it's something like that, it kind of puts into perspective like, oh, gosh, well, I guess he's right. That really wouldn't be.
So I'm actually going to contradict his statement a little, though. Because I feel that his work is different. So he might not feel it's different, but I feel his output is different.
Oh, you feel like it's different. Okay.
Forget that, that it's Pixar. I feel different emotions, and I kind of wrote about it in our post too. I honestly feel like he is able to be more free with animation. That he's not going to be able to do as many twists and turns. Like, he still does a lot of twists and turns in his other music.
But I will have to say this, so sorry to interrupt.
You're fine.
But with Pixar films, the music can't be like as dark and twisty like it can for upcoming, like Jurassic World that he's going to be scoring.
Right, it's going to be much more serious. Star Trek, he did Cloverfield and all those kind of movies.
Think maybe, or Lost.
Right.
So I think that is maybe where you're
right.
Maybe seeing it, because it's a little more lighthearted. With the exception of like Up, which was a tearjerker, but it's not dark and twisty like Jurassic World's gonna be.
See, like any live action movie that he's done, I guess maybe it's just because he typically does more of an action-y movie.
Oh, okay.
Because typically, like on Up, that scene that we all know, that amazing piano that he did for the beginning opening sequence of Up, I guess he hasn't done a film like that would be a slow, dramatic moment as much. It's more of, when you hear his other work, it's more like dun 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 dun, it's all over the place. So I feel like for some reason, for me, I just connect with his work better when it's in an animated role.
Okay.
I actually kind of find it really a lot more intriguing.
Okay. Interesting.
I find more depth.
I like both.
I like both. I just find more depth to his animated work.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
All right, well, now I'm going to have to watch a couple of the other live-action films and
see what you feel.
Ooh, I think I'm going to write about this on the forum.
Perfect. I love it. So another thing that's interesting about this, though, and I never really put any weight behind this, but when I had posted this news on Facebook, one of our readers, Raphael, mentioned that wasn't Joel McNeely scheduled to do the music for Inside Out? And I said, well, no. I didn't believe he was going to, but then I just happened to look it up. Because I had heard the rumor a long time ago. Like I said, I didn't put any weight into it, because he's done work like the movie Holes. We're talking, he's done a lot of stuff. He's been composing for years. And like ago. Returning to Neverland. He did some music for the TV show American Dad and things like that. But it never seemed to fit within Pixar's style. So I never really put a whole lot of weight into it. But it's interesting, if you go to Joel McNeely's IMDb page, it says that he's in post, like in pre-production for Inside Out. Now, granted, IMDb, I don't know how rigorously that database is updated. I don't know, is that like a Wikipedia where anybody can essentially jump in and edit?
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
I could have created the IMDb profile for after I was in Oz.
Okay.
So.
Well, interesting. But either way, that's the news that hit us today that we were pretty shocked about, and thanks to our reader Julian for pointing that out to us as well, that he had seen that. So pretty cool. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was the Pixar Post Book Club. Since this is our first book that we're running through Reading Creativity Inc. right now, we're actually going to push the video wrap-up. This podcast will be hitting most people's players on the 28th of May, which is when we were slated to do our live interactive talk. But we've actually had a few people that have jumped in later and said, I wanted to be a part of this, but I haven't finished reading yet. So
Please wait.
So we're going to actually push it back. At this point, we're going to go for another week, and I don't really want to keep going further than that because I don't want to set the precedent that we're going to push these back when we announce them. But since it is the first one and we want to get as many people interacting with this as possible, we are going to push that back for about another week. So I think that should make it about June 4th. But official announcements will be coming on the site here. So just wanted to make people aware of that as well. So if you're not done, you've got an extra week to get Creativity Inc. all read and your thoughts all in line, and then we're going to have a Google chat so we can all get on there. We'll have a video stream of Julie and I talking about it, and then also have a chat room so you guys can ask us some questions, and we'll talk about them as well.
Yeah.
Should be kind of fun.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then Star Wars Weekends was held not too long ago, and they released a second set of the Star Wars-themed die-cast characters. I won't list all of them that are in the first series, so if you want to know more about those, of course, again, hit the show notes again. But the new cars this time are Chick Hicks as Boba Fett, Red as Chewbacca, Ramon as Han Solo. There's a 3-pack featuring Luigi as C-3PO and 2 Pitties as Jawas. And then we also have a 2-pack featuring Mater as Darth Vader and Doc as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So the interesting thing here is that they re-released in these packs
a couple of them.
Yeah, Luigi as C-3PO and Mater as Darth Mater, which I was like, that's interesting. Obviously, they just wanted to continue to sell more of those, and they had probably more of the Mater as Darth Vaders, and that's probably the most popular one.
Yeah.
So
I know when we received them from last year, the Mater's ones were like the hot item.
Yeah, it is a really neat. It sounds cool too, Darth Mater. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
what kid doesn't want Mater? Mater's one of the main characters, I think.
Right. Yeah, he is. You don't think he is. Also, there's a 2-pack, which is a limited edition of 2014 units. So it's obviously, because it's Star Wars Weekends 2014, they made it limited edition to 2014 units. It's a 2-pack box of tractors as sand troopers. And if you remember in Series 1, the tractors were stormtroopers. So this is when they were sand troopers. So, and then thanks to Jeff from This Day in Pixar, who's been on our podcast a couple times, and he picked them up. He was on a recent trip to Disney. He picked us up a set, and they're on our way as we speak. So thanks again, Jeff. We really appreciate it. And we'll be sure to post some pictures and some more details about the limited edition set once we have it in hand. The other thing we wanted to note as well is if you can't make it to the parks, you do have other ways to order the sets as well. You can always call the Disney Parks ordering line. And that number, I'm just going to say it here, but don't try writing it down if you're driving or anything like that. It'll be in the show notes, is 877-560-6477, and you can order them that way. Again, that's 877-560-6477, and you can order the cars through that. Just when you call in, they're just going to say, what do you want to order? And you talk about the Star Wars cars, and you can mention they still have some of the first series as well. So you could do the Chick Hicks Red, you could go back and do Lightning McQueen.
Yeah, the merchandise hotline number, they're wonderful. They will help you with anything.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing because it's one of those things that it's not talked about in a lot of places.
It's not. Basically, pretty much anything that's sold in Disney parks, you can get from calling this number.
Right.
Which is
neat.
Yeah.
They did have an exclusive since
with the exception of Frozen merchandise.
That's true. They did have a pre-recorded message on that. But yeah, for the cars for Star Wars Weekends, they said any of the Star Wars Weekends merchandise for the first week was exclusive to the parks.
Right. But so now you can order it.
But now it can be ordered. So if you don't have them yet and you don't have a way to get into the parks, feel free to give them a call. The other thing that was announced this week in the news was August 19th, we'll see a digital release, a Blu Ray release, and a DVD release for Toy Story of Terror. So that's pretty exciting.
Yes.
This
is awesome.
Why?
Because first off, it's going to be Blu Ray. It's going to be an HD.
Right. We've watched it so many times on our DVR
And it, even though it was on ABC and it was
in HD, right?
But it wasn't pure, it wasn't true HD.
Right, we're not talking a 1080p signal from the Blu Ray player.
Yes.
Yes, it's going to be awesome.
So to see those little details, I don't know if you know, our listeners are as geeked out about these, minor details and like little hidden things as we are, but we are so excited to finally watch it in like true HD
and take
format.
Updated screenshots, because we took screenshots from the broadcast and everything like that. And we had that huge Easter egg list that we were compiling, so we're excited to be able to pull that together more and refine that post a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But then also, I mentioned that it was going to be released digitally. The Blu-ray copy will come with a high definition digital download of it, but then also it will be available on August 19th, same time on Disney Movies Anywhere. And if you remember,
is an amazing app.
Okay, so when it first came out, we thought, and we talked about it, that it was pretty much going to be a repository connecting to iTunes for your existing Disney movies that you put the codes in for.
Right, nothing else.
And we had talked about that we thought it was going to have a few tricks up its sleeve. I mentioned that I thought they were going to put some games in there, and I still think they're going to do more of that. But it's really become pretty quickly a much bigger app with having a lot of the classic Disney cartoons in there.
Yeah, some exclusive content, like behind-the-scenes content. Obviously, Radiator Springs 500.5, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Right.
But there's so many cool things, and I really, really dove into it this past week. And I am loving it. I'm really loving it.
Yeah?
And I know we talked about it.
Just seeing some of the classics and everything?
Yeah, and I really hope Disney puts more of those classics out. But I do think that they're going to change the name to it. I know you and I discussed this.
Mm-hmm. It's Disney Movies Anywhere. And our prediction is...
it's just going to be Disney Anywhere.
Yeah, that's our take. Because they're doing so much more with it now. I bet it's just going to be Disney Anywhere. We both kind of came up with it at the same time. We were both like, aha! Just with thinking about all that the app was going to do.
Yeah, because there's so much stuff that could be added to this. And I mean, they could add the digital books in this app. I mean, the sky is the freaking limit for this app, and I'm really excited about it.
You just like having all your Disney stuff in one place. It makes you feel happy.
Oh my gosh, it does.
So, all right, so you'd mentioned Disney Movies Anywhere and Radiator Springs 500.5, and yes, we're actually going to talk about that after the Pixar Pipeline Project, which is where this time, drum roll please, we were able to interview Chloe Kloezeman, who is part of the editorial team at Pixar, and this is the next step along the pipeline from the story department. And again, just to refresh people in case you haven't heard, on episode 27 we had talked about the Pixar Pipeline Project that we had started, a great thing that's going to actually follow the process of a movie through all of the main 9 departments at Pixar. It's going to take us all the way through the end of the year for these interviews, so we're going to do one a month. So last month we started with Louis Gonzalez, who works as a part of the story department. If you haven't heard that, definitely catch up with that one. It doesn't have to be listened to in order, because much like the Pixar Pipeline, although it follows this order of going from story to editorial, and I won't say any more because we're surprising each month with the next department, it's not a completely linear process. It'll go back and it'll bounce back and forth between story and editorial for quite a while. So, but anyways, these are the main order of the departments that it'll go to. But one thing I wanted to clear up, we had a great reader question come in, and it was actually from a reader, Rob Jeffries, who asked, I would have thought that the pipeline would have started with developing the story itself and not storyboarding. So I thought, you know what, that's a great point, because we had that understanding in our heads when we started the Pixar Pipeline Project, but I want to clear that up. So the way we're running the pipeline is that we're picking it up right when the story is developed and gets underway at Pixar. So it's not one of these things where we're going to talk about all the development and the teams and conversations that go ahead of time. We're assuming as part of the Pipeline Project, because that can get really nebulous. With all the people that could be involved, and it's less defined.
Right.
We wanted to kind of have something that was more defined. Here are the departments that it goes through, here are the stages that it goes through, and the people that it touches.
The idea has received the green light.
Exactly. So we're going to take it all the way through the theater, essentially. Yep. So yeah, it's received the green light, now we're going to take it through the theater. So that's a great point. So thanks for the question, Rob. And if anybody else has any questions or clarifications, please feel free to let us know. We love that kind of feedback. So So let's get our interview going with Chloe. Again, she is a second assistant editor who worked on Toy Story of Terror. She was actually brought in as part of that project, but she had some outside experience as well as some great insights and fun stories that she had with her experience and how long she's been at Pixar. So let's go ahead and listen to that interview, and we'll pick back up after that. All right, so today we're talking with Chloe Kloezeman, and she is part of the editing department at Pixar. So I guess one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you as well, not only as part of the pipeline, but when someone traditionally thinks of film editing, you're usually more involved, or a traditional role of editing would be involved near the end of a film. But with animation, you're involved throughout the entire process. So can you put a little bit more detail around that and describe what a typical editor in animation does throughout the various stages of a project? And I hit you right with a big one right off the bat.
No problem.
Okay.
So animation editing is interesting because we're involved in the entire process from start to finish. So when the film is still in the story department, we're working there, and until right before it goes to theaters, we're still working. So we get to see it in all the different stages, which is very unique. This means that we also get to play a pretty big role in the story. We get to see what's working, what's not working. We get to work with the director, throw out jokes or specific scenes if we feel like it's not helping prove the story. We also get to just have a lot of influence over the script, which is pretty special. In live action film, editors are only working at the end, and they have to make something out of whatever the camera people shoot. So they don't get a whole lot of flexibility. But here, it's wide open. We can request new shots. We can say, hey, this would be really funny if we had this line. We'll go downstairs and record it. So we have a lot of control over the film. It's pretty special.
Wow, that's fantastic. And obviously I had known a little bit of that background, but hearing even more of it is even more interesting. One of the other things that you had talked about with traditional film editing is that you're held to somewhat of a limitation because you're only dealing with what's already been shot. But obviously, like you had mentioned with animation, there's a lot more openness. You're involved in so many other parts of the process. Is that openness freeing, or can it just add more layers and more stress to that process since you have so many more options?
Well, part of this job is constantly reinventing the story. So we'll go through many different versions of the film or of a scene, and you have to not be too attached to it. So in some ways, it's freeing because we can keep reinventing it over and over again. In other senses, it's kind of sad. We'll get really attached to a specific joke or a specific moment, and then it'll be dropped from the film, and it's like, oh, I really missed that part, and you'll be seeing it in the DVDs area.
Yep.
So that's kind of sad. But all in all, I think it's really freeing to be able to just come up with something on the fly and then just make it happen.
With that, you mentioned as far as getting attached to one joke or something like that, and you're sad to see it go. But how do you, as the editorial department, when you're putting all of these different pieces in play throughout the film, and looking at storyboards, and you're putting in the animation that the animators do and all those types of things, how do you keep a vision of the whole picture when you're constantly jotting around to the individual processes?
So that's part of the reasons that editorial is unique. We do get to work with the whole 90 minutes of film. Animators will work on a couple seconds, one shot in the film, and that's all they do. But we have to keep in mind the whole big picture. So how we make it easier for ourselves is we break the scenes up into sequences, and those sequences get numbered and named, and we focus on that one scene at a time. If you're the editor, you get that one scene, focus on that, make it great, move on to the next thing. And I think that allows for the editor to be creative and really work out that one problem, and then a couple months later we piece it all together, and then we get to see how it works in relation to the other scenes. Typically we work in acts, so the first half hour of the film we'll kind of be working on all those moments at one time, and then we'll move on to the next part of the film. So it's easy to see how they work in relation to each other.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't know how that worked as far as, breaking it down by the acts, but that certainly would help you, I guess, at least see the overall picture because you're looking at each section of it, like you said. So that's cool.
Sure. And our films are usually broken into 3 acts. So on the film I'm currently working on right now, we're working on the first act, and that's all you have to worry about for the moment.
All right. Yep. Well, I know that, speaking of the 3-act structure, I know that you had worked on Toy Story of Terror.
Right.
And that was obviously a 4-act structure. So I'll use that as my segue into Toy Story of Terror.
Good one. Very nice.
Thank you. Very clean. Yes. So what did you, was there a particular scene that you worked on in Toy Story of Terror that, you could tell people about that say, hey, this is the scene that I particularly had a big hand in?
Well, the nature of that project was, it was short. It was 21 minutes, and that means that the crew was smaller. It took a short amount of time to make. It also meant that me as a second assistant editor, I got to play a pretty big role in it. So my hands were all over that whole film. But I'd say that the bathroom scene, when Jesse meets Combat Carl, that was a scene that I got to do a lot of sound effects work in. I got to create this sort of sound of when Jessie was crawling in the bathtub, when she was hiding from the iguana.
Yeah. I can hear it in my head right now.
Yeah. So that was really fun. That's one of the roles that the second assistant editor gets to play when the editor needs sound effects work before we go to the final mix at the end of the film. The second assistant gets to pull sound effects and place them into the cut from our sound effects database. And for that specific shot, there was no sound effect that was in the database that said, doll crawling on a bathtub. That just doesn't exist.
Right.
So in that specific area, I had to get creative, and I think I ended up using like a duck, like sort of a metal crawl space sound.
Yeah.
And that stuck, and that might have even stuck in the final film. Don't quote me on that. I'm not for sure, but it sounds pretty similar, or it definitely informed the sound effects editor at the end of the film and what he wanted to use.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, and like I said, I can hear that in my head right now. And it does, you could hear it as a little bit of a duct because you can hear like that, more of a hollow porcelain kind of tub sound in there as well. So that's cool.
Right. Yeah, so that's a lot of fun. That's one of my favorite parts of this job, actually.
And you mentioned some of the structure there as far as the second assistant editor, and that's, kind of one of the areas that you focus in. Can you give us an idea as far as the editing department structure overall? What are the different roles within that? And again, that's another big question, but and you don't have to go totally down into the weeds, but at least at a higher level. Sure.
So I think it's easiest to understand if we talk about how it was on Toy Story of Terror, actually. So because it was a small show, there was only 3 of us. So we had the lead editor, who was Axel Geddes, the first assistant, Kathy Graves, and then me, the second assistant. So the lead editor makes all of the creative decisions. He does most of the editing. He interacts with the other departments. He's very close with the director. So he leads the whole department. Mm-hmm. The first assistant is his right man or her right-hand man. Kathy Graves, the first, actually did a fair amount of cutting on that show. She actually got to edit quite a bit because it was such a small show. But so she helps assist the editor, and she also manages the second assistant, which was me. My job was to support the editor, make sure that he had everything that he needed. I was in charge of all the assets. So everything that the story, animation, camera, and staging department does, they send to us, and then we have to organize it and get it into the Avid so that the editor is able to cut with it.
So you're assisting, supporting, and setting up so that way you can help streamline Axel's, in that instance, his job.
Exactly, yeah. We just want our editors to be able to be as creative as possible. We don't want them to have to worry about any of the organizational process, administrative tasks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's what we do. We just want to make it super simple for them. You can imagine on a feature film, it takes 4 years to make, and just how many assets are in the system, just thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of media come in and out of editorial. And that's just way too much for the editor to be worrying about. So it's our job to be familiar with everything, know how to get to things really quickly, just really make the editor's job easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. On a feature film, about how many people are typically involved in the editing department at that point?
So it depends on the stage of the film. Sometimes in the story phase, there's usually 2 assistant editor or second assistants in my position, 1 first assistant, there's the lead, and then there's sometimes a couple associate editors. We didn't have that on Toy Story of Terror, but on my current project, we have 2 associates currently. And they do a lot of cutting, but they're not making the final decisions on the film. On the editorial side.
And then also, I guess, just kind of thinking about Toy Story of Terror as well, obviously you were included in a group that was nominated for an Annie Award for that. So first off, congratulations.
Thank you. It's such an honor.
Oh my gosh, I know. I was just, because obviously we did some, Annie Award coverage. And, I remember I kept hearing Chloe. I'm like, Chloe Kloezeman, why have I heard that? And I read it because it was part of that nomination list. So you mentioned it was an honor, but I mean, were you totally surprised by that nomination?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not often that the assistants get recognized for their editing work just because the teams are so big.
Right.
So Monsters University was nominated, and that was the lead, and the second film editor and the associate editor were the names on the list for that, and that totally makes sense. But for Toy Story of Terror, because it was so small and because we all played such a active role in creating the film, Galen Sussman, the producer, wanted to include all of us, which was so sweet and such an honor. So it was a really special experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So in thinking about technology, you had mentioned, Avid and those types of things. We hear a lot about technology assisting in animation. It's again, it's kind of one of those things where the animation is kind of more the front and center, and we hear about, even in this last time around with Monsters University and the Blue Umbrella, with the advent of adding global illumination for the lighting standpoint. Is there anything that has affected the trajectory of the editing department?
Well, the technology is ever-changing. Avid is constantly coming up with upgrades and new tools to make our jobs easier. But I would say that it's actually the Pixar technical department that really is changing the way that assistant editors work. They're creating all kinds of tools that aren't available to the rest of the industry.
Okay.
So there's these kind of magical tools that have these weird, funny names, and they help us process dialogue, log recording sessions, just do all kinds of things that to help eliminate time. So things that assistant editors used to have to spend hours doing now can be finished in like 10 minutes. And that really gives us a lot more time to be creative. That's really special.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because I think of, from the story department, I think they have, Pitch Doctor, which they bounce back and forth between Photoshop and those types of things. And then the animation department with the custom Presto animation system. So that, I guess, just thinking about that when you're talking about kind of some of the ways to whittle it down, give me a day in the life of a editor. What are some of the things? I mean, I know we kind of talked at a high level that you're, punching in some of the audio effects and those types of things.
Sure.
But how do you roll through an average day when you get your series that you're working on?
The second assistant's job is interesting because we have to be really technical and we also have to be creative at the same time. Or when we're asked for our opinion, we need to have a creative solution on hand. So it's kind of an interesting job. We have to be ready to do both things. But basically, we spend our days managing all the assets that come in. We take care of everything that comes into the Avid and everything that leaves the Avid. So if other departments need the current cut, we export it to them so they know that they're working with the most up-to-date version. We go downstairs and we record dialogue with the Scratch actors. I don't know if you know about this, but when we're still working out the story, we have actors from within the studio do the voices. So we are in charge of going downstairs and logging those recording sessions.
Oh, okay.
That's a really fun job. Then we bring the audio back upstairs and we process it, which means that we break it up into a bunch of small chunks and then we transcribe the line. This makes it easier for the editor to figure out which line he wants to use, which read he wants to use, which read is the best, and that informs the general vibe of the scene.
You mentioned transcribing them and pulling out the best. Is that the main editor's decision as far as, because I guess it just comes down to, how do you determine what is the best? Is it just judgment?
Yeah, it's pretty subjective, but sometimes we'll all be sitting in a room and everybody will be like, yep, that one. You just can kind of tell when it's the right read. We don't usually make those decisions. That's what the editor decides, and sometimes the director. But when we're in the sessions, we note how many reads there are of each line, and we try to be very familiar with the lines. So if the editor needs something specific, he's like, oh, I really need when someone like screams, I need this very specific kind of scream. And I can go, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is. And I go into my Avid, I find it really quickly, and I say, here you go, cut it on in. And he's like, great. And it all happened. We turned it around really quickly.
All right, so let's get to know you a little bit. Describe your journey to Pixar, how long you've been there, how you got there, those types of things.
Sure. So I've been at Pixar for 2 years. I got hired for the Toy Story of Terror project. At the time, I had just quit my job in Los Angeles and moved up to the Bay Area. I grew up here, so I just wanted to come home and be with my family, see my siblings grow up. And I just basically did a leap of faith and hoped that something would work out. And then I got a phone call from Pixar, and here I am. I got lucky, basically.
Yeah, and how long, you mentioned you quit your job in LA. I think one of the common threads is that typically people are not going to get hired straight away out of college into Pixar, and I'm not saying that's not possible, but what we've heard in other interviews that we've done is that typically, you're going to work, and you're going to work hard to get there. How was your journey from that standpoint? How long were you out in the field before you found your way to Pixar?
So out of college, I moved to Los Angeles, and I worked at my job down there for about 3 years. And that was a really important time because I got to learn how to work in a professional environment. I learned all of my technical Avid skills from that job. And then I was able to bring those skills that I had here to Pixar. I think it's really important for young people to go and get that experience elsewhere, because then you have more to bring to here when you're interviewing for this job. Pixar is an amazing place to work, but I'm so grateful for it now, having worked in other places. I wouldn't have known how great it is had I come directly here.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, they want to get right to Pixar because obviously that's the dream that's in people's heads. But as far as gaining some of those other skills, it's, Pixar is getting a lot of people that are knocking on their door wanting to work there. So if you're gaining those other skills, it's only going to help you that much more once it comes time for when you're going to apply and try to get in.
Right, exactly. I had no skills coming out of college. I went to a school that was very theory-based, so I could talk about film all day long, but I didn't actually know how to make anything. So going and getting those skills was very important.
Very interesting. So what are the things that, looking back on it, that you think people could benefit from to learn, which are essential to the job, that you say, hey, I wish I would have known either this software, hardware, this theory, or whatever? Are there things that you feel that would be very beneficial for people to know going into this?
Well, I learned, for editing, there's really only two or three programs that people use to edit, digital editing. So I learned on Final Cut Pro, but that was a self-taught kind of education. It would have been great if my college would have done some sort of Final Cut or Avid training, but that's not what a lot of people who go into film school want to learn. So
sure,
that's not what they're going to focus on. But it would have been very helpful for me to have some classical editing training. I just never got it. And it's not totally necessary, but it would be nice to have had. And also, not everybody needs this, but it's great having a film background and knowing the history. People love talking about film history and references to films and old films. On Toy Story of Terror, for example, Angus MacLean is a huge film buff, and it was great to have known, to be able to know the films that he's referencing. That's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he had several in there that I can think of. There was something with The Shining. There was something with what was it? Something like a Highball 8 or something like that.
Oh yeah, it was sprinkled all over the film.
Yeah.
All kinds of things.
I think there was a Raising Arizona one in there too, or something.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
He loves Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I hadn't seen that film. So in the middle of the day, one day and during production, he like ran into my office and he said, "Chloe, they're playing Raiders of Lost Ark in Emeryville. We got to go now." We all got into the car and drove over and watched the film, and he sat next to me and just stared at me the whole time to see when I was laughing. It was a lot of pressure, but it was great.
All right, so there you have it, our interview with Chloe Kloezeman from Pixar. As you heard, it kind of ended with me laughing right there, but what we actually did is we just continued the conversation for a little bit, talked about some fun stories about her time on Toy Story of Terror, some of the adventures that the crew had when they were recording sessions and things like that. But one of the things that I think I took away from the interview was in regards to the editorial team. I think it was really exciting to hear how much involvement they have with the script as far as the input that they have. Mm-hmm. Not that they're writing it, but the input that they have, that it's going back and forth as the involvement, as a good synergy between storyboarding, editorial, animation. It's so great that they're so central as part of that process, because like we talked about as well in the interview, in traditional live action film, you just don't get that type of involvement. You get your film that's been shot and you have to work with that. You don't get to necessarily in the storyboarding process shape how the animation is going to end up based on how you think the timing and the beats go.
And I can't remember which film. It might have been one of the Toy Stories films, but there was an extra which interviewed, it was like maybe like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, which had a bunch of editors talk about, their path to Pixar, but just kind of talked about editing and how they basically said that they're basically the melting pot of the film. Mm-hmm. Like everything melts into editing. They kind of have a touch, their hands in every department. So I think that's really interesting what she had to say with after, and then seeing that short clip extra. So I think that's really fascinating.
I also thought it was really cool that she talked about the balance of, getting a traditional film degree with learning some of the technical elements herself. So she got her film degree, but then was able to self-teach herself on Final Cut Pro and those types of things, which assisted when she got more of that education. And again, mirroring the same comment that we hear time and time again from people at Pixar is, don't worry if you don't get to Pixar right away, if it's your first job right outside of college or anything like that. Get that experience at other studios, then you have a real appreciation and knowledge of the industry a little bit more when you're physically coming into Pixar, and you can appreciate it more.
And I also think it's really good to point out that it is education, education, education. You are never going to stop learning.
Right.
It's continuous.
Yeah, I mean, she talked about that the Pixar research group and the technical team is coming up with all these new tools that's helping them out as well, that are plugging into Avid and the editor that they use and all those types of things. Really, really fascinating stuff. So that's our second step along the way in the Pixar Pipeline Project. We've got 7 more interviews to go, so we've got quite the length to keep looking forward to. So certainly we hope you guys liked Chloe's interview, and thank you so much to Pixar and Chloe for helping us put that interview together and for her taking the time.
Yes.
One of the other things that I did want to say, though, before we fully get off of this is, after the interview, like I mentioned, we were talking about some fun stories about Toy Story Terror, and one of them that she told me, I went back and I said, hey, can I include a little clip of this in the podcast? And she said, that's absolutely fine. So she described it was like a little tidbit, a hidden Easter egg that nobody would know about. It wasn't a reference to another movie or anything like that. It was actually a reference to her in the short. So she mentioned that she would, in her daily job at work, she would come running into a room of coworkers and say, with a ton of excitement and energy, go, hey guys, what's going on? And things along those lines. But she kept saying guys all the time. And so they started laughing about it and having a good joke. Well, if you recall from Toy Story of Terror, Jessie says guys a ton. So the crew threw her a little nod in the television special and ended up having to cut out instances of times saying guys, because it became too many in the final production. But there's actually still quite a few that made it in.
Quite a few.
So we pulled together a little fun clip of Jessie saying guys. So here, listen to this.
Come on, guys. This isn't scary. Where are you guys going? Guys, where are you? Hey, guys, wait up! Woody, Buzz!
So, how about that, eh?
I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it's such a fun story, and there was a couple more that she had told as well. Just so many fun adventures that they did.
I think it's fun. It makes it personal. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's just, that camaraderie, that family that they become.
Absolutely. Definitely great teamwork together, and it sounds like that team was just rock solid, having to know all of those little intricate details, and the fact that, pretty exciting that coming in on Toy Story of Terror as a second assistant, that she was able to work as much as she was with the, as many layers deep as she was. She said typically on a project, on a larger film, she wouldn't have had as much involvement, but since it was a special and a shorter film, it worked out great. So yeah. Really, really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. So thanks again, Chloe. We had a blast chatting with you. We were going to start jumping right into Radiator Springs 500 and a half discussion right now, but we realized we got off on a total tangent on Disney Movies Anywhere.
I know that we forgot to talk about the special features on the Toy Story of Terror Blu Ray.
Absolutely.
Which includes the director's commentary for Party Source Rex. Now, my goodness, if we do not get emails weekly about Party Source Rex.
Not about the director's commentary.
Not about the director's but sometimes it is. But so to all the Party Source Rex fans out there, yes, it's coming.
Yeah, I know we're going to get some more news. I'm really excited to see what other tidbits of information might be in there that we haven't talked about yet. It's going to be really exciting, so we're thrilled to hear that. And then obviously it's also going to include Hawaiian Vacation and the director's commentary for that, which has been previously released, as well as, what's the other one I'm forgetting here? The other Toy Story tune.
Small Fry?
Small Fry.
I'm like
we just got done talking about Angus and everything, and why did my brain just completely stop like that? But you know what?
Turned off for a second. That's okay.
Happens to all these old people. Happens to all these old people like me. Anyway.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, so that director's commentary had already previously been released as well, and you're actually working up a little something special on Small Fry right now.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I have been diving into the director's commentary and really, really going frame by frame on Small Fry, and I have found some amazing, just like little details and just some like learning about some like just funny things that the directors always talk about on the commentary. So I'm really excited. It'll be posted probably in the next day or two, so look out for that.
Yeah. So pretty cool, though, that Toy Story of Terror, it's going to be a great price. It's actually right around US, about $10, depending on which format you're getting it on, Blu Ray, DVD, whatever. But it's around the $10 or $11 mark. And, it's cool that it comes with, the Toy Story of Terror. It's going to have a ton of deleted scenes from Toy Story of Terror, some behind-the-scenes looks at Toy Story of Terror. So definitely, if you haven't pre-ordered it yet, again, comes out August 19th. Be sure to pick that up. And or pre-order it now, and can't wait to hear everybody's thoughts on those deleted scenes and the Partysaurus Rex director's commentary when that comes out. Yeah. And we were excited to, just as another side note, we were really excited to see that it was on the Toy Story of Terror release as part of the Toy Story Toons, because before, obviously, it had only been on the re-release of
Monsters, Inc.
On Blu Ray, because that was out for a short while, then it was for some reason stopped being produced and then came out again. Back in the
Disney Vault.
Back in the Disney Vault. And it came out again. You could buy Party Source Rex digitally, through Amazon or iTunes, but it's cool just to see it on another release as well, to have it get some, I think, more proper attention than just having it on a re-release for Monsters, Inc. Right, even though it was cool to see it that way too, and I was glad to see it in Blu Ray and, high definition. All right, well, let's talk some Radiator Springs 500 and a half. Just about a week ago in the wee hours of the morning,
oh my goodness.
1 a.m. our time.
It's a good thing that we're night owls. I mean, that's early still for us.
Yeah. So Disney Pixar sprung a certain release on us out of the blue, obviously that being Radiator Springs 500 and a half. Let's take a quick listen to just the intro of Radiator Springs 500 and a half and what the short is about.
Historical Society is proud to honor the spirit of Stanley, our town's founder. He was the bravest, most daring, most adventurous explorer the world has ever known. Let's hear it for Stanley himself!
Well, howdy, friends!
All right, well, howdy, friends. We're back. So the first thing that you notice there is that Bonnie Hunt, Sally, and then you heard a quick snippet of Owen Wilson as Lightning McQueen.
Yes,
so,
Owen Wilson is, reprising Lightning McQueen in a short.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is the first time he's done it. I mean, even on other theatrical releases, like Tokyo Mater, it was Keith Ferguson that had done that role. So it was pretty neat that, he had jumped back in. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So let's give a little bit more background. We heard just the intro there, but I actually want to read a little bit of the plot synopsis as well. So this is what I wrote up on our review post. So the town of Radiator Springs is just about to kick off their annual Stanley Days celebration in honor of their town's founder when Mater spots a cloud of dust in the distance. Ooh. A group of Baja racers has sped into town looking for Lightning McQueen, having heard that he's the fastest car around. Shortly thereafter, the Baja racers insult Stanley, prompting Lightning to utter, "Looks like our leisurely drive just turned into a race." That's my best Owen Wilson. Yeah. So Mater informs the racers of their course with a series of extremely quick and confusing directions which sets up the ensuing chaos. While the racers are speeding their way across the terrain, Mater leads the rest of the gang on the relaxing frontier path. When Mater and the crew arrive back in town, they wonder where the racers are. They should have been back by now. As the racers finally speed back into town after dark, they're humbled by Stanley's bravery. They can't understand how a car, like Stanley, could have traveled such a treacherous journey, not knowing that they took a completely different path. So that was my summary that I came up with in my review post. So I was pretty happy with that.
Yes, I love it.
I get to brag for a moment there. No, so anyways, so let's chat about it for a quick second about the short. We've watched it a couple different times now. Mm-hmm. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being best and putting you on the spot, what would you rate it go?
A 4.
Wow, you had that loaded up.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy the, was it the rim shot pity? I thought those were really clever and just kind of unexpected.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun little thing. I will say, though, that whenever the rim shot appeared, it was obviously Mater doing one of his, silly jokes. Mm-hmm. And that was actually one of the things in the forum that some people said was they thought it was too much. Too much of the quick jokes of the, always having to have the rim shot pity. But it was polar opposites. Some people thought that was the best portion of it. I thought it was hilarious. I actually gave it...
It made me giggle, so I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the point of the Cars Toons. They're just, they're having fun and just going around and being Mater. Yeah,
and I really liked the new costuming done with all of the cars, the main characters. I thought that was really clever. And I really liked seeing Radiator Springs again.
Yeah, it was cool seeing, going back in the town and kind of getting a vibe for everything.
Yeah, and I guess, this is kind of like the first time that we've seen it since we've really been at Cars Land. That I feel like, oh gosh, I've walked that street. It was so, for me, I think that's why maybe I rated it a little higher, because it felt a little magical to me, because I felt like, oh my gosh, I've really been there before.
Well, it's good to see your old friends and feel like you're maybe back at home a little bit. Yeah, not at home, but it's a familiar place.
Yeah, so I really liked seeing all that again.
I gave it 4 stars as well. And in fact, the ratings on the website were anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5, so it ranged right in there. So averaging out right at 4, which is what we said as well. But what surprised us, again, like we kind of alluded to, is that the whole cast was back. The length of the short being 6 minutes and 20 seconds, that's right about on track with Tokyo Mater, which was a theatrical release ahead of Bolt. So it made me think back and wonder. I'm like, boy, this really feels so full-fledged and it was so involved. It felt like it could have been at times a theatrical release as far as some of the other shorts that have been there.
Makes you wonder if they toyed around with maybe putting this in front of Maleficent.
I don't know. Possibly. I don't know if they would have done that. But so actually, I wondered that. But then I thought back. If you go back to the D23 Expo, Rob Gibbs, the director of Radiator Springs 500.5, spoke. And I don't think from there that it was necessarily an intention, because he said it was actually going to premiere as part of the on the Disney Channel. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting.
Which is usually when most of them premiere, is on the Disney Channel.
Right, but it only got me thinking about that line of, was this ever intended for a theatrical release? Only because of the length of it and I guess just the completeness of it with the whole vocal cast and all that kind of stuff. Like they were putting extra effort behind it for a more polished look. So I don't know, but Yeah, Dan the Pixar fan, actually brought that up on the forum, and we had chatted about that a little bit as well. But speaking of the forum, Aiden, who's forum user Mac95, he posted something really, I thought, amazing as well. So many people, and this is what he said, many people know that Pixar often has to scrap good ideas in some of their movies, but puts them into another film, usually sequels at some point. Well, a scene in this short was one of those scenes that was cut out. If you check the Cars DVD, there's a deleted scene in which Lightning gets lost in an old rotted graveyard where creepy deceased cars lie rusting, not unlike the scene in Radiator Springs 500 and a half. So I gotta say, the forum, this is where the benefit of it comes for me, because I had totally forgot about that clip, and I gotta give it to Aiden for having that memory to come back from that, because that was a clip that was it's really just an animatic.
Yeah, it's not even fully animated. It's just the animatic of it.
Right, it's the animation drawings put together by the editorial department
with voiceover,
with scratch vocals on it to test it. And the clip was actually called Lost, and it was from June of 2002. So it's crazy. So the clip, you can actually see it on YouTube, or if you want, you can also just pop in the Cars DVD. It's one of the extras on there. So Lightning rolls through cactus plants, falls down a big cliff, stumbles into a creepy nighttime forest, and then sees a decrepit car rusted through like the car's bones. So just like, the description that he said.
Just like in the fake enchanted forest where they get lost
exactly.
at the very end of the short.
Like where Lightning backs up into that car.
Yes.
If you see this deleted scene, you have to, if you're listening to this, it is just like that scene. This is where I really want to talk to Rob Gibbs, the short's director, again, because I'd love to know if that's what it was from, if they were trying to find a way to do a throwback there. And it's interesting because one of the other forum users, Pricklepants, happened to jump in there and said that one of the problems that he kind of thought was like a little bit, like, hey, what's going on here with the short, was he said Lightning would know Radiator Springs like the back of his hand. Right. Why was he so confused when Mater told him go left, right, left, 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 right, left, right? He should have known that wasn't the right way.
Right.
But the conversation continued on the forum, and Dan, the Pixar fan, jumped in and said, well, you know what? I know my roots in my town, but sometimes if I get, and he said, and his town is kind of in the woods, woodsy, more open area. Sometimes if he takes a different turn, he might not know where he is either. And you know me with my terrible directions.
Yes.
Maybe Lightning's has terrible directions like I do. I can get lost all the time. I back out of my driveway and I forget which way to go to which road.
Oh, goodness.
So
this is true.
It is true. So anyways, maybe that's it. Or maybe the better answer is just because they were trying to find a way to throw in this deleted scene.
Yeah,
and
I think
it fit
maybe
right in
it's, you're just not supposed to think about that.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly what it was. But I thought that was really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is why the forum is great, just like you said. I mean, all this conversation and these, well, what ifs and, what about this? It's all those, theories and suggestions and conversation.
Right.
It's really awesome to hear it.
Right. Yeah, and one of the
whether we've thought about it in our heads or whether you and I have had discussions, it's cool to see these other people,
of course,
plotting their own ideas as well.
Right, and other people have different takes on it. Like one of the other comments that had come up, in talking about, some of the things that people were like, hey, what's going on, is that one of the things that was brought up was a lot of the shorts more recently have been very fast-paced and kind of throwing in a lot of content. Mm-hmm. I think for the Cars Toon, like this Tales from Radiator Springs 500 and a half, it makes sense because, the Mater shorts, the Cars Toons, they're always kind of fast-paced and fast-moving like that. But like Party Central was kind of that way as well, where it's really fast-paced. There's a lot of action going on. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the fans are looking at it going, hey, I miss some of the slower, like Jerry's Game and those kind of things, where the story evolved a little bit more. But it'll be interesting to see how the trajectory of, the shorts go. Because Blue Umbrella was pretty slow, though. It wasn't like packed.
No.
But it followed one storyline throughout, is what I'm saying. Like,
right.
This one followed in 6 minutes the storyline of Mater doing the slow drive and the Baja racers coming into town, challenging to a race, and then going on the other treacherous journey.
Right.
So it was a lot crammed into that 6 minutes. So it's interesting just to see the trajectory of where these shorts and tunes will go.
Yeah, and you know what we haven't talked about yet was your favorite moments of the short.
Yes, let's do that.
The camera angles.
Yes.
And like the dust and the sound difference. And it's funny because, you know, when we watched it the first time together, you had mentioned that before, and I picked up on it the second time. Because I always look at kind of the lighting. I know you and I both do. But you were really focused on the camera angles and the sound this time for this short.
Yeah, for some reason, that's what caught me more was because it was more extreme angles. It's what you'd see like if you were watching like a Baja race on TV where they have like the side mounted camera
like
on
the
the car.
GoPro.
Exactly. We've just become accustomed to that type of camera work when you're talking about a race, that you have the on-car camera.
Right.
So that was really cool. And then obviously, like I talked about too, I just loved the fact that when it was a camera that was mounted above the right front fender, that when it went to that camera angle, it was as if you were getting supplementary sound from that camera as well, because you were hearing more of the rocks and dirt
and
hitting the inside of the metal wheel well.
Can sound like the
Yeah, it was awesome. Absolutely awesome. And then they cut away from it. You still heard the loud...
You still heard it, but it was more
subdued. It was, exactly. Yeah. I love that it was more
wasn't
focused.
Wasn't as concentrated, yeah.
Yes. And the color palette, I think everybody commented on the color palette that they chose for it. Especially that scene where they're coming out of the woods with where all the flowers are.
Where Mater and the Radiator Springs
yes,
gang
yeah,
is.
the
enchanted,
the real enchanted forest, and how it like was the reflection on the water.
Very serene and peaceful.
Yeah. Everybody, I mean, throughout the whole thing though, they talked about how great it was, that it was like that low sunlight, the warm glow of the magic hour, and everything kind of like that. It really did. The lighting, the color palette, everything just seemed so great with the characters in their, you know, early 1900s garb and everything like that. It all just kind of worked visually for sure, without a doubt. And you know my feelings on Sheriff's design.
I know.
It's funny because everybody else is like, okay, this hood was painted white, but I don't know why. The hood painted light, the searchlights being lower, and then the huge sheriff symbol on the door side panel was just way too cool. I want that in the diecast.
I know. And you know what's funny is I'd like to know the character design for these I mean, I guess it's not really character design. It's more like costuming for these characters.
Right.
But I'd like to see the sketches for that.
Right.
I hope when they make, you know, when Pixar releases a DVD with all of these on it, that we kind of see some of those behind the scenes or neat sketches that, you know, because I'm sure each of them had a few of them. Red was amazing. Red was my favorite redesign for this film.
And it didn't seem like a lot, but if you see him at the very beginning, like you talked about, I didn't even notice it.
He has the spool.
Yeah, like the big traditional hose reel, like where it was like the flat white hose that would wrap up on the back. I only noticed it really from the front with
You just noticed the bell on the top and all the gold accents.
Right. Yeah, that was quite a difference. You know, the other thing that I haven't even talked about in the forum yet, and I didn't talk about it in our review, but I just thought of it right now when we were talking, was about the title. Radiator Springs 500.5. It was discussed during the D23 Expo panel on short films that it was called 500.5, but there was no discussion of why it was 500.5.
Yeah, you're right. You know what's funny? We never even, like watching that, I never even thought twice about it.
Right. Yeah, and it was just...
I guess it's because it's a race, so you just...
Well, yeah, like the Daytona 500 or something like that.
Yeah,
but why the half was actually because Rob Gibbs said it in the D23 Expo that Mater named the race, and he thought it sounded funny. He said that just Mater came up with it. But it was never addressed or anything like that.
You know what? I bet that snippet was probably cut out. It's just like a lot of people on our forum were like, why was Mater dressed up like a hula girl?
Yeah, I wonder, was there something where he had that random Hawaiian outfit all of a sudden, the hula outfit?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I kind of feel like that's what he kind of thought he had to wear based on how they were all talking.
He was just the crazy one, as usual. You're really thinking about that one, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Well, no, because I knew I had like where it was, and I'm trying to think of the full dialogue from the short because I had it. Now I've totally lost it.
All right, well, let's listen to it.
Everyone dressed for adventure?
Oh, I'm roaring my 20.
Hey, I'm representing.
I got my jugs, man.
I got my coconut.
Okay, so now I remember after hearing that. I think it could be two things. I think it could be from when he said, is everyone dressed for adventure? He's kind of like all made up, like Hawaiian, like Amazon kind of thing, with coconut headlights.
Yeah.
Or it could be on a plate, from what Fillmore said, that he had his jugs.
And he's got his coconuts. Okay.
So I think it could be one of the two. Kind of a play, kind of just like a thing, just kind of a little humor.
Yeah. The other thing that I really liked about it, too, was where Fillmore says he's got his jugs. If you look at it real closely, the jugs, almost hit the side of his van.
Yes.
And you hear a little, yeah. It's really cool how they added that extra little element in there as well. I thought that was really neat. Right. I mean, obviously, they're going to do that. It's just cool
the small little details.
You really dig into a short or a film and you really start to notice all the layers and all the detail that goes into these things. That's where you really start to appreciate it. So just wanted to mention that.
And the sounds, too, that made.
That's what I was talking about.
I know. It's just not only just the subtle movement, but the sounds on top of that movement.
Right.
It's not just one-dimensional. It's actually a full circle.
Exactly. Yeah. It fades a lot. If you listen to it on headphones, it fades a lot, right to left channel and all that. It's really, really cool stuff. So at the top of the show, we had mentioned some Inside Out news with Michael Giacchino scoring Inside Out. But on our next podcast episode, we're going to be actually chatting about a post that Dan the Pixar fan discussed in the forum. It's about Inside Out, and it includes an early animation test for Joy, where Pete Docter talks about how this is all new technology for Pixar. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to dig into that. And then something that's been drawing a lot of comparisons to an early 90s television show called Herman's Head has been coming up. I saw it when Dan mentioned it, but now it's coming up on a whole bunch of other forums as well, where Variety all of a sudden picked up that article saying that the description for Inside Out was updated on Pixar's site, which, by the way, we posted that on April 7th. So, but anyways, I thought that was interesting too. So we're going to talk about a comparison there, and just some of the other projects that have been out there that look inside the mind. People are calling Inside Out really inventive, and it truly is. I'm not taking anything away from it, but
people are drawing similarities.
But people are drawing similarities to it, and I just want to talk about it a little bit more, and let's see what those similarities may be. So take a look at it. If you have any thoughts or comments in regards to Inside Out, feel free to include them, and any of your comments might be included on our next podcast, and we'll chat about them from the forum. All right, well, that about wraps up episode 28 of the Pixar Post Podcast. Be sure to follow us on all of our normal social media channels. Of course, I'm going to go through this as fast as I usually do. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Vine, Pinterest, YouTube, Google+, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. And of course, if you like our show, I always like to ask, let us know your feedback, thoughts, comments. You can also rate our show on iTunes. Leave us a comment. Send us an email at info@pixarpost.com. We always love to hear your feedback. Well, signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to pixarpost.com all week for the latest Pixar news.